Hey, what's up guys, if you're new here, my name's Sam. I'm a photographer and filmmaker based here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And first off, I'm so sorry about my hair. It's a mess. It's like a jungle. Being stuck in lockdown and quarantine means that all the barbershops are closed, so I haven't been going out to cut my hair. But you're not here to hear me complain about my hair. You're here to hear me talk about this. This is Freewell's new magnetic variable ND filter. It's more than just a variable ND filter, and today we're going to be talking about whether you should be picking this up. So just a quick disclaimer, Freewell did send me this filter to do a review and to test it out. However, they're not paying me, or they're not asking me to say anything specific. In fact, they're not even seeing this video before it goes up. So this is my true and honest opinions about this filter. However, if you are interested in picking this up, I would highly appreciate if you click the Kickstarter link down in the description below. It's the first link. I do get a small commission. It doesn't charge you anything extra, but it does help out the channel to create content like this. However, if you don't want to, it's perfectly fine. This is just my honest and real opinions of this filter. So you might be wondering, what is this filter and what makes it different from other filters out there? And obviously from the name, it's based around magnets. You know, it's this whole magnetic filter where you have a base ring and you can basically just swap in and out basically things that you would want. Let's say you want an ND filter or you want a CPL and things like that. So you can do this. One thing to note that this is proprietary. So what that means is that it only works within this filter. I'm not so sure if it will work with other Freewell magnetic filters, but it does only work within the Freewell ecosystem, particularly with this setup. But let's not confuse you anymore. Let's just quickly look at what is inside the box. I'm not so sure if it's exactly what you would get with the Kickstarter, because this might be a pre-production unit, but it should be very similar. So this is what you get in the box. It comes in a very plain box. It says the world's first versatile magnetic variable ND filter. Quite a mouthful, hope they change the name. But what you see inside is a 2 to 5 stop, a 6 to 9 stop, a CPL, an ND32 and CPL, a 1/8 miss, a variable ND and miss 2 to 5 and 6 to 9. And this variant is the 82mm, and if I'm not mistaken, Freewell also gives a 95mm, which is pretty cool. So first thing, when you open the box, you get like some paperwork and stickers. Unfortunately, I think I threw those away. But it does come in this really nice hard case. Well, hard soft case. It's not a metal case. It's like a PVC feeling case, but it is hard and it's really nice. Zippers are very strong and nice to use. And it's very nice to protect your filters. When you open it up, it just gives you a couple of slots to put your filters. I do wish they would have used gutters instead of a fixed fabric, because I find that the opening of the case is a little bit too small, so sometimes I accidentally touch the filters when I take it out of the case. However, it is very nice that Freewell provided this really beautiful case to store your filters. So the thing that brings it all together is this magnetic base ring. This is what you put in your lens, and you'll be changing out elements depending on what you need. You have the variable ND base. I'll explain what all this does later on. Then you have the miss and variable ND base. And you have the 2 to 5 stop, and if you turn this around, it will become a CPL filter. Next, you have the 6 to 9 stop, and if you turn this around, it becomes an ND32 and CPL filter. Another cool thing that Freewell gives you is a magnetic filter cap. So obviously you can't actually use your own lens caps on this filter, so it's cool that Freewell does give you this to protect the front of your element. Just magnetized on, and it's pretty cool. It's a nice touch, and it just brings the whole package together. However, it's not something that I personally use. That it's just a bit cumbersome for me. So now that you've seen what you get inside the box, let's quickly talk about the build quality. And the build quality of this filter is actually really good. It's not the most premium feeling filter that I've used before, but it is quite hefty and everything is pretty well made. It feels more like an aluminum, but I'm not exactly sure what it's exactly made of. I'm pretty sure you can find that in the description of the Kickstarter. But one thing I do want to point out is that the threading on this filter is actually really good. If you've used any cheap ND filters, cheap filters, or cheap step up, step down rings, you would know that the threading on these filters are very important, because sometimes if they're made of poor quality, you can get them stuck on your lenses, which is something that you do not want. But the great thing I want to report is that this filter, especially the threading ring, is really good. Overall, the way everything kind of like clicks into place, the front element when you take it on and off, everything is flush and looks like it's made for each, at least it looks like it's made for this piece of product. And one of the biggest concerns is, especially when something that has so many moving parts, sometimes there's going to be error in production and things like that. But this filter, every single part that moves in and out is actually really good, and it looks really nice as well. So before we continue, let's quickly look at how you actually use this filter. There are a lot of moving parts and there are a lot of things that you can actually do with this filter, and if I'm not mistaken, Freewell says that this has about like 15 to 17 features built into this filter system alone. So I do want to at least show you how it's being used, especially the different combinations that Freewell suggests. So using this filter is actually pretty simple. However, there are a few things to keep in mind because you can potentially put this the wrong way. So we have the base ring here, which is the thing that brings the entire filter together. If I'm not mistaken, it's the only thing that's magnetized. So first things first, you got to decide, do you want to use this filter as a variable ND filter, or do you want to use it as a CPL filter? So let's go with the variable ND filter first, and the next thing you got to decide is, do you want diffusion with your variable ND? If you want diffusion, you would take the Mist X VND base, and if you don't want diffusion, you just want normal ND, you would take the VND base. Only difference is that Mist has diffusion inside. They both will give you about the same amount of light cut, which is about 1 stop. So for this example, we're actually going to be using the Mist X VND base. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your base filter and you're going to look at your base ring, and you're going to match the Freewell filter on the base ring and the base ND. You're just going to put them together and they will click right into place. So the next step is to decide, do you want a 2 to 5 stop or do you want a 6 to 9 stop? Let's go with the 2 to 5 stop first. So this is very important. If you want to use the 2 to 5 stop or the variable ND filter, you have to have the 2 to 5 stop words facing the front. That means away from the camera. So when you look at the filter, you're looking at the 2 to 5 stop. If you put it the other way around, it's going to function as a CPL filter. So once you have decided which ND stop you want, you're going to be taking a look at the side of the base ring, and if you notice, there is going to be an A and a triangle. You're going to look for the A and the Freewell logo at the side, and what you're going to do is you're going to match the A on the 2 to 5 stop and the A on the base ring, and they will just click together. Potentially you can put this the wrong way because of how it's made, and you'll know you put it the wrong way because the turn on the variable ND filter is going to be very small and you're not going to be noticing any change in ND. So there's only one correct way. So let's look at if you want to put your 6 to 9 stop. Essentially it's going to be the same thing, just make sure the 6 to 9 stop is facing the front, look for the A and match it up on the base ring, and there you go, you have a 6 to 9 stop ND filter. So now let's say you want to use the CPL filter, and this is very important to keep note, is you have to make sure that there is no base ND inside the base ring when you're using this as a CPL filter. There will be color shifts if you turn your CPL if you have a base ring inside, and it looks something like this. This is going to be the same for the ND32, and CPL is make sure that the CPL is facing the front. And unlike the variable ND filter, there are no stops on the CPL, so it doesn't matter how you put it. You don't have to align any logo. Just put it over the base ring and it will just snap into place, and you can use your CPL filter. So let's jump into the quality test of the variable ND filter, and just a quick note, I'm actually using the Mist and variable ND base on this shot, and I'm using the 2 to 5 stop, and I'm around 2.5 stops of NDs. If you're looking to see how the diffusion looks at a 1/8 power, this is actually what it is. And the way I did this test was I used the Canon C70 that's shooting me right now, mainly because it has one of the cleanest NDs that I've used. It has a 2, 4, 6 extended range of 8 to 10, and these are some of the cleanest NDs I've used. I'm also comparing this Freewell filter to the other filters that I own, which is specifically a Moment ND filter. I do have a Tiffin and a cheaper ND filter, but I decided not to include them in this test because after looking at the Freewell images, this Freewell filter just is much better than the Tiffin and the cheaper ND filters because those produce a much greener color cast and softens up your image quite a lot. So I didn't bother comparing those two based on my experience. So the way I judge exposure for this is I use force color on my C70, and I would crank the exposure, change the settings or the filter depending on what I need to a point where it's just above yellow. A few things are clipping in yellow, and I will bring it back down so I would not see any yellow. Obviously yellow is just before clipping red. And I was also shooting this at C-Log 2, and I just placed the Canon provided LUT onto it. I did not make any color correction or anything like that. So what you're seeing is straight out of the camera, white balance at 5600. So let's just jump straight into the image quality test. So we're going to be looking at the Canon C70 built-in ND filters first, and as you can tell from these shots, these are the cleanest out of the bunch. Hardly any color shifts. If we look at our vector scope, it does remain relatively in the same position. It does lean towards red and magenta towards the extended range of 8 to 10, but overall you are going to be getting relatively clean files. So let's look at the Freewell ND filter now, and the first things first, for fun, we're going to be trying the ND base. Straight away you can see that the sky darkens up, and this tells me that this is essentially just a polarizer. So when you go to ND2, the first thing you notice, not much color shifts, maybe slightly in the shadows, but I can't really see. However, the one thing I do notice is that this is an f10 versus the f11 on the ND2 on the Canon C70. This tells me that this variable ND filter is potentially slightly inaccurate, or maybe it's a user error where I didn't put precisely at ND2, or it could be slight variance in manufacturing. But this is a common theme that you will see, that the Freewell ND is slightly a little bit off in their calculation of exposures. However, this isn't really a big deal because with a variable ND filter you can fine-tune your exposure. So when we go to ND4, we can straight away see that there is a green color cast, and even if we look at our vector scope, it is pushing towards green. For me, the 2 to 5 stop actually produces more color cast than the 6 to 9, as I will show you later. So when we go to ND6, our vector scope pushes back down a little bit more towards blue, and it does show in a little bit more cleaner tone, not so much green and yellow. However, I do see some greens in the mid-tone slightly and shadows, but once again, not too bad. When we go to ND8, we can see our vector scope is pushing towards the green and cyan side. So it does tell me that there is a color shift, and I can tell straight away. However, it's not as bad to my eyes as the ND4, which means that the 6 to 9 is a little bit cleaner. And obviously ND9, you can see our vector scope does show towards green, so that is a green cast. So let's look at the moment variable ND filter. Pretty neutral once again, lowest setting in the variable ND. However, this is just the 6 to 9. I don't have the 2 to 5. When we go to ND8, straight away you can see it's pushing more towards magenta, and this time is a lot more than what the Freewell was pushing towards green. Not really a deal breaker because this is still pretty much salvageable, and our ND9 obviously pushing way more towards magenta. Something I do want to note about the Freewell is, although yes, there is evident color cast and the 6 to 9 does produce better results, I am pretty happy with this because it is a variable ND filter, and I totally understand the drawbacks. One thing is, this is much better than cheaper ND filters and my Tiffin variable ND filter, because those produce way more green tones, and it's very hard to correct those because they saturate your skin, they saturate the greens of trees too much that it's very hard to pinpoint these colors, and they push a lot to the yellow as well, which it makes it very unflattering, like jaundice for example. So whilst the Freewell does produce a green color cast, it's manageable and I'm pretty happy with it. And just for kicks, let's just look at what the Mist and variable ND base does. Another thing that I did notice about using this filter, using this variable ND filter, is that it lifts the contrast slightly, so you see a little bit more in the shadows and things like that. It's not particularly something that I like. I think that is something that I would not want in any of my filters, because if I'm going to add filters, especially a variable ND filter, the only thing I want it to do is cut down light. I don't want it to do anything else. If I wanted to diffusion, if I wanted to lift my blacks, I would put a diffusion filter on it. So this is something to keep in mind when you're trying to match cameras with this filter. Preferably you should be matching together same filters on different cameras so that they do match in terms of contrast. However, once again, it is a little bit easy to fix if you spend a little bit of time in color correction. So the next thing I will look at is actually the vignetting. This was actually used on a 1DX Mark III, on a 16mm in this next few tests, and as you can see from the vignetting, it's actually not that bad. However, if you do use towards the end of the range, especially the 2 at closer towards the 5 or 9 stop, you will see that the effect of polarization does become a little bit more apparent. The corners of the left and right side of the image do start to become a little bit darker than the middle. This is something that I don't particularly like, and it's very close to having that X pattern that a lot of people don't like in the variable ND filters. But one of the benefits of using this 2 to 5 and 6 to 9 stop is obviously they have hard stops, so you don't go over the polarization level. But still, once again, you do have to keep in mind of the darkening of the left and right side of the frame, especially when you're going towards the more extreme ends of these ND filters. So let's quickly jump into the CPL quality as well, looking at the differences. And I've only got one other CPL filter, and that is the Tiffin CPL. So looking at the CPL function of the Freewell filter, it is not as drastic as the ND filter in terms of color shifts. Very clean. I'll be more than happy to use this. I hardly see any color shifts, and in my vector scope as well. Also, it's pretty clean. And if we look at just the comparison of the Tiffin, it's pretty much the same. So across the board, these two are pretty nice, and I'm happy with the results of the CPL from the Freewell. So now as we're coming towards the end, I do want to talk about the usability of this from my experience using it in the real world and just testing it out. Overall, I think the usability of this filter is actually pretty good if you are using one lens. I think the main issue with a lot of this 2 to 5, 6 to 9, which I don't particularly like, I think this was first introduced by Polar Pro, where they split up the ND filters, and I understand it's to kind of like so that you don't go over the polarization level and you introduce the X pattern. However, I think when you're using a variable ND filter, the main thing that you're looking for is just the ease of use and versatility. When I have to keep switching out, or when I have to buy two separate variable ND filters, which are honestly pretty pricey on its own, you know, like a 2 to 5 and the 6 to 9 combined, like buying two together, it's pretty pricey. And not only that, not only the price, is that when I want to shoot, let's say indoors, I'm using a 2 to 5, and when I go out it's too bright, I need to switch to a 6 to 9, I need to unscrew and then replace my filter, and it's honestly a pain in the ass. And I think that's what this particular Freewell magnetic variable ND filter solves. And it solves it very well, because it's very easy to just remove the front element and replace it with another, with the 6 to 9 or whatever that you want. However, one of the things that I do find is that it really works well when you're using one lens. If you're using multiple lenses, you're kind of like back to the same issue where you need to remove the filter, and then you need to put it on your lens and things like that. So that's one of the drawbacks, I guess. If you're using multiple lenses, you are still going to be having the same problem of unscrewing and screwing in and out. However, I do want to note one thing in terms of usability, is that it's actually quite difficult at points to remove the front portion of the filter. And the main reason for this is because it's just, everything's just made flush together. There are grooves on the front elements where you can sort of like grip it. However, it's not grippy enough, and the front ring is a little bit too thin. And what happens is you find yourself trying to grip everything, but you don't have enough grip, and what happens is your fingers just slip off. And so what you need to do is you actually need to wedge your thumb or whatever finger in between the filter and the base ring to take it out. It has resulted in me accidentally putting a thumbprint on the filter ring, which is something that I do not want. And also another thing is, because everything's flushed together, and when you're looking from the back of the lens, when the filter is here and you're looking from the back, you can't actually tell what stop you are at. So the only way to tell which stop on the lens is actually to be looking at the back of the screen, which, yes, most of the time you will be. However, if your camera is a little bit lower and you don't have a flip out screen, you actually need to bend down, which can be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes. And then also, because of the way the filter is made, there are actually grooves on the front portion of the base ring, which it means that there's only one correct way for you to put the front element ring on. But if your camera is down in front of you or is up in front of you, it's actually hard to see without actually bringing it down to put it down on. So if I want to be fast, I can't just do it by feel. I kind of have to still look down and move and actually align the logos together, because you can actually put the front ring on incorrectly, which will result in no neutral density effect. So you got to keep that in mind when you're using it. But other than that, it's actually pretty easy. The magnets on this I think are very good. They are strong. They haven't lost their strength over time in the months that I've been using them. I actually have shaken this filter and the front ring has not dropped off. However, I'm not so sure in the long run how well the magnets will hold up. In my experience from reading a lot of forums and listening to a lot of reviews on the Freewell magnetic filter system, not this one, the one that they have currently, which is I think fixed ND filters, nobody has complained about the strength of the magnets loosening over time. So I don't think I'm too worried about the magnets losing their strength on this one. So now let's just quickly look at some potential improvements that I would like to see in this filter. The first one is I would have liked to see markings on the back of the ring. So it's not just on the edge of the ring, but on the back, so that when I'm looking at the back, I can actually see where the Freewell logo is located and where the stops are at. And also another thing I would like to see is the front part of the ring will actually be a little bit bigger and not flushed in design to the base ring. The reason why, it's just easier. Number one, it's easier for me to grab and remove. Another thing also, if the front portion is bigger, I can actually see it from behind the camera and I don't have to look over the lens just to turn my ND filter and see the effects. I would have liked to see the effects of the ND filter from the back, just like how the Moment ND filter does, which I think is a very smart decision and design from Moment. And I do wish that it would have been on this Freewell filter. So to end this video, I do want to talk about who I think this filter is for. The main people I think this filter is for are for beginners or people who have not built up their filter system yet. If you don't have a bunch of ND filters, you don't have a bunch of CPL or diffusion filters, this is a perfect option for you, because it basically gives you everything in one. And to a certain extent, you're actually going to be consolidating your color scheme if you're using one brand of filter. You're not going to be mixing and matching different ND filters that give you different color casts of different variation levels. So you're going to be using the same filter throughout your entire set, and it will give you consistent images, making it easy for you to edit. It's still pricey, but for what you're paying for, you're actually getting a pretty good deal, considering that you have a 2:5, a 6:9, a CPL, a ND32 and CPL, as well as a diffusion filter built in. On top of that, you get a magnetic system that's easy for you to remove in and out. All you have to do is worry about how you're going to change it onto different lenses. You don't have to keep screwing out a 2:5 and then putting on a 6:9 and going back and forth. It's just easy as just prying your finger, taking it out and slapping on another front element. However, if you are professional and you have a bunch of filters already, I can't really see a real reason for you to pick this up unless you find that flexibility within one filter ecosystem is what you're looking for. You can't use this filter with any other filters because everything here is pretty much proprietary. I'm not too particularly sure if you can mix and match this with the current offerings that Freewell have, but from what I understand, this filter system is made for itself. It's made to be used in tandem with each other and not with other filters. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If there was something that I didn't cover in this video about the filter that you would like to know, feel free to ask me a question, drop me a comment below. I'll be more than happy to help you test it out. If this video has helped you decide to pick this up, don't forget, I would really appreciate if you use the Kickstarter link below. I do get a small commission. Once again, you don't You don't get charged anything extra. It just helps me produce content like this for the future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps out the channel. I really appreciate all the support that everybody's been giving me. It's really allowed me to pursue this, sharing about what I feel about certain kinds of equipment, sharing about photography and filmmaking and things like that. And I'm excited to do more in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I will see you in the next one.